Exploring my family tree, I unearthed a startling piece of history. One of my ancestors had ties to the infamous Salem witch trials. The revelation was both fascinating and haunting, a connection to a turbulent period that still echoes through time. As I reflected on this ancestral link, I couldn't help but consider how this coastline, which feels so steeped in history, has witnessed its own share of monumental events. Centuries earlier, the winds of ambition drove Julius Caesar's army to these very shores, launching the first Roman invasion. This coastline became a gateway to history, a place where empires sought to expand and impose their will. Much later, that same ambition carried the vision of another towering figure, Emperor Napoleon. Standing on the French coast just 75 miles across the Channel, he marshaled a force of over 100,000 troops, declaring with unshakable confidence that only a favorable wind separated his army from planting an imperial eagle atop the tower. Yet, ambition alone was not enough to conquer the sea. The British Royal Navy, vigilant and relentless, patrolled the waters, a wall of ships that Napoleon's forces could not breach. Despite their might, the combined French and Spanish fleets found themselves blockaded in ports scattered across Europe, their ships trapped and their grand designs thwarted. The Channel, though narrow, proved an unyielding barrier, turning Napoleon's dream of conquest into a fleeting mirage and leaving the Tower of London untouched by his imperial grasp. As I stood on this historic coastline, I was struck by how intertwined ambition and resilience had shaped the story. From Caesar's legions to Napoleon's thwarted invasion, and even to the trials of my ancestor in Salem, each thread is part of a larger tapestry, a reminder of the enduring struggle between the forces of power and the unyielding heights of faith. Napoleon, ever the audacious tactician, devised a daring strategy that he believed could turn the tide of history. His vision was simple yet monumental. If his fleets could elude the British blockades, disrupt their naval supremacy in the Atlantic, and unite in the English Channel, they would pave the way for an invasion that would forever alter the balance of power. "Let us control the Channel for 6 hours," he famously declared, "and we will control the world." In the spring of 1805, the plan seemed poised to succeed. French Vice Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve, commanding a fleet stationed at Toulon, managed to slip past the British blockade, taking them by surprise. It was a rare victory in an era where British naval dominance seemed insurmountable. Villeneuve's escape sent ripples of uncertainty across the Royal Navy and a flicker of hope through Napoleon's vast army, anxiously awaiting their chance to cross the Channel. But hot on Villeneuve's heels was the indomitable Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, a man whose name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies and inspired unshakable loyalty for his country. Nelson was no ordinary naval officer. He was the embodiment of Britain's maritime might, a living legend whose every victory seemed to reinforce the notion of British invincibility. His unyielding devotion to king and country, coupled with his genius for naval warfare, made him a figure both revered and mythologized. Nelson was not just a commander. He was a symbol of an England rooted in tradition, yet facing the challenges of a rapidly changing world. His exploits came at a time when the British Empire was both expanding its reach and confronting the moral weight of its colonial masters. For Nelson, the sea was not just a battleground, but a theater of national pride, where the fate of the empire was contested and secured. His daring spirit, his unwavering resolve, and his ability to inspire those under his command made him the terror of the high seas, a force of nature as relentless as the waters he sailed. As the two fleets played a deadly game of pursuit and evasion, Napoleon's ambitions teetered on the edge of realization. The stakes could not have been higher. The outcome of this naval chess match would decide whether the imperial eagle would soar over Britain, or whether it would be dashed against the unyielding spirit of a nation used to lead. Years ago, the French Revolution tore through France, dismantling its monarchy with violent fervor and shaking the old crowns of Europe with their force. In response, the monarchies rallied to defend their thrones, expecting to confront the flames of revolution. In Instead, they faced a far more formidable adversary, a dictator cloaked in the rhetoric of liberty and equality. Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of unyielding ambition and unparalleled military genius, had risen from the chaos, mastering the art of warfare and bending Europe to his will. Yet, while Napoleon dominated the land, the seas belonged to Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. Time and again, Nelson's daring and brilliance had thwarted Napoleon's grand designs. It was Nelson who crushed the French fleet at Aboukir Bay during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign in 1798, severing the emperor's lifeline to his ambitions in the east. It was Nelson who led the British to victory at Copenhagen in 1801, striking a blow to Napoleon's allies in the north. Despite the loss of an arm in battle, Nelson's indomitable spirit remained unbroken. "I would willingly have half my fleet burned to ensure their destruction," he once confessed in a fevered letter. "I am in a fever. God send we may find them." Now, Nelson's unrelenting pursuit had brought him across the Atlantic to the West Indies, where Villeneuve had gathered a combined force of French and Spanish ships. Napoleon's grand strategy depended on Villeneuve breaking the British blockade, reuniting his fleet, and delivering the invasion force to the English coast. However, Villeneuve, wary of Nelson's shadow looming ever closer, made a desperate decision. Rather than await additional reinforcements, he darted back across the Atlantic toward the Spanish coast, hoping to outmaneuver the British fleet. The gamble failed. After a foggy and inconclusive skirmish with British warships, Villeneuve's resolve began to waver. Then came orders from Napoleon himself: sail into the Channel and launch the invasion of England. But when Villeneuve sighted British ships on the horizon, his confidence shattered. Instead of advancing, he retreated to Cadiz, seeking safety in the fortified harbor. There, his fleet was swiftly trapped by a British blockade. As Villeneuve languished in Cadiz, the clock ticked against Napoleon's grand plans. The fleet that was meant to secure the Channel and pave the way for invasion now sat idle, its movements dictated by fear and relentless Nelson. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation, one that would decide the fate of Napoleon's ambitions and the future of England itself. These blockades have long starved the French of vital supplies and naval experience, while Britain's navy has grown stronger. The Royal Navy, a formidable force, is staffed by both eager volunteers and conscripted sailors. Through the harsh practice of impressment, thousands of civilians, many with maritime skills, are forcibly taken from their families by press gangs and compelled into service. These sailors endure brutal discipline and rigorous training, emerging as hardened fighters imbued with Britain's naval spirit. Despite the strength of the Royal Navy, Napoleon cannot afford delays while his admirals hesitate to engage. Time is of the essence, and the stakes grow higher with each passing day. To the east, Austrian and Russian forces are mobilizing against Napoleon. Realizing this new threat, he abandons his invasion camps and leads his army toward war. Meanwhile, outside Cadiz, Horatio Nelson arrives aboard the formidable HMS Victory, a warship boasting over 100 guns, and takes command of the British fleet. Villeneuve, defying Napoleon's orders to break the blockade and sail into the Mediterranean, hesitates. He refuses to risk battle until he learns that the Emperor has dispatched a vice admiral to replace him, a direct challenge to his honor. On the morning of October 19th, the Franco-Spanish fleet finally set out toward Cape Trafalgar, drawing the attention of the British. At the same time, Napoleon triumphs over the Austrian forces at home, but laments bitterly: "Soldiers, we should have avenged 6 centuries of insults and restored freedom to the seas." Yet, unbeknownst to him, the decisive battle for control of the oceans is about to begin. On the morning of October 21, 1805, the waters off Cape Trafalgar stir with anticipation. The Franco-Spanish fleet, a formidable armada of 33 ships of the line and 30,000 men, stretches across the horizon. Opposing them is Horatio Nelson's British fleet, outnumbered with just 27 ships and 17,000 men. Yet the disparity in numbers belies a crucial truth. The British sailors are seasoned veterans, drilled to near perfection, and Nelson has meticulously crafted a plan that could redefine war. Rejecting the conventional line of battle formation, where fleets engage in parallel lines, Nelson conceives of a daring move. His fleet will advance in two columns, cutting through the staggered enemy line and breaking it into three isolated zones. This bold tactic aims to sow chaos among the enemy, disrupt their coordination, and capitalize on the superior training of the British gunners in the close-quarters combat that will follow. It is a gamble, a high-stakes strategy that will either secure victory or risk annihilation. Nelson, aboard the HMS Victory, leads the northern column, his presence a beacon of resolve to his men. To the south, Vice Admiral Cuthbert Collingwood, commanding from the Royal Sovereign, spearheads the second column. The faint wind offers little assistance, and the British fleet inches forward, agonizingly slowly. For hours, the sailors endure the creeping advance, their eyes fixed on the towering masts of the enemy fleet. To break the tension, the decks of British ships come alive with the strains of patriotic music. Bands play rousing tunes, Rule Britannia and Hearts of Oak, their melodies carried across the water. The men sing along, their voices blending with the wind, a resolute chorus of defiance. The atmosphere is charged with both dread and determination, as if the sea itself holds its breath for the coming clash. As the distance narrows, Nelson's fleet moves with deliberate precision. The men know the stakes. They fight not just for victory, but for survival, for country, and for the legacy of their admiral, whose unwavering confidence inspires them. Overhead, the white sails of the British fleet flutter against the pale sky, advancing toward destiny. The moment approaches when shot and flame will erupt, and the waves will bear witness to one of the most decisive battles in history. The Battle of Trafalgar looms, its outcome poised to reshape the balance of power in Europe and etch the name of Horatio and Nelson into the annals of legend. When every gun, rope, and sail is in place, all the men can do is wait, like beasts to the slaughter. By signal flags, Nelson relays the message England expects that every man will do his duty. At 1,000 yards out, the French and Spanish guns heavily bombard the leading British ships. The sails tear, beams crack. Angled forward, the British lack an effective way to return fire. Most men simply take cover. A 16-year-old English boy, in his first battle, sees a comrade's head shot away and writes, "My ears rang with the shrieks of the wounded and the moans of the dying." Collingwood breaks the line first and smashes a broadside into the Spanish ship. The massacre begins. In the north, Nelson's Victory approaches under a barrage of several ships, including Villeneuve's French flagship and the massive Spanish trinidad, a four-decker of 136 guns. Nelson stands unflinching on the quarterdeck. A shot smashes the wheel, from then on forcing 40 men to steer the Victory from below by verbal commands. Next to Nelson, Secretary Scott is blown in half by a cannonball. At last, the Victory breaks the line behind Villeneuve's ship. Double and triple shot guns blast 1.5 tons of iron into the French stern, instantly killing and maiming hundreds of Villeneuve's crew. The Victory then comes alongside the French 74-gun Redoutable. Guns thunder in the choking air. Under no illusions about matching rapid British cannon fire, the French have packed their ships with infantry, who now unleash musket fire and grenades on the Victory's upper deck. A French marksman shoots down Horatio Nelson. Nelson collapses, announces that his backbone is shot through, and he's carried below decks. The crew of the shorter Redoutable then lowers the main yard and begins to board the Victory with swords, hatchets, and pistols. But a British ship comes to the aid of the Victory and fires a terrible broadside into the Victory. Fire! Masts of both ships crash down as the cannons continue. The French decks are strewn with dripping entrails and screaming sailors. The captain records 522 casualties out of a crew of just over 600. Really, I know of nothing on board that had not been hit by shot. In the midst of this horrible carnage and devastation, my splendid fellows who had not been killed kept cheering. Long live the Emperor. The battle all around has morphed into clusters of ships exchanging fire. The wounded are carried down to the dark and groaning lower decks. Resurgents saw off mangled limbs and tend to the wretched and the dying. In the belly of the Victory, Horatio Nelson has lost all feeling below his chest. Certain of his own demise, he instructs the surgeon to direct his attention to the enemy. Nelson can hear the crew above him cheer of each enemy ship captured, and a brief visit from his friend, Captain Thomas Hardy, provides him with updates on that. The route looks certain as the day wears on. The British encircle and pummel their targets while the enemy ships that have turned to engage from the north make only a half-hearted attempt. Hardy goes down again to see Lord Nelson and informs him that victory is at hand, that the British have not lost a ship and 14 or 15 enemy vessels have surrendered. Nelson strains, that is well, but I bargained for 20. After some last words, Hardy kisses his friend on the cheek and then the forehead. God bless you, Hardy, Nelson says. And thereafter, he repeats the phrase, thank God I have done my duty. Horatio Nelson dies sometime after 4 o'clock. Upon hearing of his death, British sailors and captains alike will sob openly. As the sun begins to set, a fire aboard the French ship Achille reaches the magazine. The brilliant eruption and the last bellow of the drowning ship signal the imminent end of the Battle of Trafalgar. The ocean teems with splinters and sail, limbs and corpses thrown overboard, and treading survivors gasping for rescue. British dead and wounded number around 1,700, while the French and Spanish count roughly 7,000, with an equal number taken prisoner. While some have managed to flee, over half of the Franco-Spanish fleet is captured, to be taken as British prizes. The Spanish and French, both of Catholic tradition, keep all their dead on board for a proper burial. One 16-year-old British sailor boards Trinidad and writes she had between 300 and 400 killed. Her beams were covered with blood, brains, and pieces of flesh. The French and Spanish recapture a few vessels. Several more are lost as a dark hurricane thrashes the bleeding ships of the West. A French sailor witnesses the harrowing aftermath of battle as survivors are vanished. Against the coast, the wounded scream in agony, and when the tide recedes, they drag themselves along on uninjured limbs, desperately seeking escape, only to find death waiting further on. The Franco-Spanish naval power lies in ruins, along with Napoleon's grand plans to invade Britain. In England, the triumph at Trafalgar is celebrated with muted joy, overshadowed by the devastating loss of Admiral Nelson, the nation's hero, who fell at the height of victory. A grieving public mourns during his regal state funeral, a grand procession adorned with flags captured at Trafalgar. Among the attendees is the defeated Villeneuve, a prisoner of war, who returns to France in the spring for a prisoner exchange. Napoleon suppresses news of the Trafalgar defeat, yet Villeneuve's disgrace lingers, casting shame. Not long after his return to France, Villeneuve is found dead in a hotel. Official reports attribute his death to suicide, citing a front wound. However, the nature of his death, 6 stab wounds to the lungs and 1 to the heart, raises inevitable questions. Though Trafalgar establishes Britain's enduring naval supremacy, Napoleon soon exacts a stunning victory on land at the Battle of Austerlitz, dismantling the Holy Roman Empire and further cementing his dominance in Europe. The war rages on, and Napoleon's power continues to grow. Our ancestors endured remarkable times, and discovering their stories can feel overwhelming. I'm Filipino, Irish, Polish, Scottish, and a bit English. Not exactly a straightforward lineage. But thanks to my heritage, uncovering my family history was simpler than I ever imagined. By entering a few generations worth of names and details, the site quickly identified records, matches, and related family trees. With access to over 19 billion records, it uncovered an Irish baptism record from 1859 and even pinpointed the exact date and city where my Irish great-grandfather arrived. I also learned that one of my grandmother's ancestral lines has deep roots in England. During the Salem witch trials, my ancestor Benjamin Marshall signed a letter defending a husband and wife accused of witchcraft. Though the husband was tragically executed, the life was eventually spared. Click the link at the top of the description and start exploring